Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first edition of Be Prepared, a new Lorcana podcast, because we have both wanted to make content for a while, and now, 1 year into Lorcana, it is time to finally make that leap from player to podcaster.
And it's definitely not because we're both not very good at playing. I'm just kidding.
Well, you
No,
do have one up on me right now, so we'll get into that at some point. You do have
that's,
bragging rights over me, so
that's true. Just for right now,
just
yeah.
for right now, yeah, I'll get revenge eventually. So I'm your host, JerryDamage, and joining me is Steven.
Yeah, I go by Hybrid Theory on all the tournament games. So if you see us in public, that's probably what our melee things is. I'm Hybrid Theory and he's JerryDamage. So
I've been JerryDamage longer than I've not been JerryDamage, so that's a long time. So because
that's fair.
I am old, so I've been around a while. So let's just kind of start off with a brief introduction, and then we're going to get into peek behind the curtain, the green screen, so to speak. We are doing this a few days before Shimmering Skies releases. I am so excited for Shimmering Skies. Um, I can't wait to get these cards in. My game store now, you can't buy it until Friday, but they close at 10. So guess what? 10:01. It's no longer Thursday. So 10:01, I will be at my local game store getting my purchases, and then but I got to save them for my son though. My 13-year-old plays with me, and he would be very, very mad at me if I opened them without him. So
Yeah,
even though
it's what I. Yeah, I'm not sure. Like the last set, I was. So for the start of last set, I was actually in New York City. We're both in Tennessee and Kentucky, so I was in New York City, and it was like really interesting, like going around like Manhattan and Brooklyn, and like trying to see what they had in stock at each store, and just kind of seeing how each store operated. Like I went to a few stores that were like willing to sell me everything that they had, and then some stores were like, we're taking pre-orders. Like, so this will be because I started playing with about 2 weeks before the last set. So this will be like the first real, I guess, my second set of playing. I got into it the full this last set. So it's definitely an interesting feeling that like I had to catch up and learn all the cards, right? Like I had to catch up sets 1, 2, and 3, and then set 4 came out while I was playing, so I had to catch up with those. And like now it's like I feel like I have a pretty good handle on the first 4 set of cards, and then now set 5 is going to come in and wreck the world. I feel like it's going to change, and of course, losing Bucky as well is gonna change things up a lot as well, which I would argue is a good thing. Some people might not, but
no, I
I
think it's
think
a good thing.
I think yeah, I think the consensus here on this conversation is that it's a good thing. But
So my backstory: I started playing. So I read an article in March of 2023 about this Disney card game coming out, and I have tried to get my kids to play a game with me. I'm a longtime gamer. I've been gaming competitively for 22 years, and since I had kids, my one thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to share a game with them, and could not get them into anything. They didn't want Magic. They didn't want Pokemon. They didn't want anything like that. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to do it, Disney's the way to do it. And so Gen Con happened, and you weren't around for Gen Con, but Gen Con was mass hysteria. I wasn't there, but I was watching from afar, and I got caught up into it. And I said, we're going to get the starter decks. We're going to give it a shot. I overspent for the starter decks. I'm not going to disclose how much it was, but it was way more than they're worth. We got them. My kids loved it. And then you could not find first chapter anywhere. Trying to find that was a headache. Literally, you're walking into Walmart as the lady puts it on the shelf. I grabbed one box. Another guy grabbed another. It did not leave her hands to touch the box. And that was the only product I saw of chapter 1 for a long, long time.
wow.
But yeah, and then chapter 2 rolled around, Rise of the Floodborn and things. So I've been with it since then and loved it. My 13-year-old son, he rides around with me. We've played in multiple set champs and stuff like that. So it's been a great bonding thing for he and I. And I love this game. Can't wait to see where it goes as it goes into its second year. And so, now it's time to kind of start talking about it more. Instead of playing, we're going to podcast about it too. So
That's
let's
right.
expand
Until
it.
they have an online client, we have all kinds of time to talk at home, right? So,
That's true.
I'm like, fingers crossed to have a Lorcana panel at D23 coming up this week. I'm just like, fingers crossed, they got to announce it, right? Like it's like I feel like it has to happen, but I have probably too much hope, but I believe there's a chance. I think it's greater than zero.
It is greater than zero. Yeah, it's greater than zero. I don't know if the online client. It will happen eventually. I'm
Yeah.
fairly certain that eventually the online client will happen. When it will happen, though, we all like to think that they could have just paid Pavel and just bought Pixelborn.
Yeah.
But obviously they want to have more control over every aspect of that. The one kicker is this is not just Ravensburger's decision. This is Disney's baby, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of at my work we have done some stuff with Disney in licensing, and Disney is very particular about every single little thing that you do with them. So it could be one of those things where the initial thing said, "Hey, you're doing a card game and card game accessories," and
Yep.
so they've had to work out the logistics, the contracts of what you can do for a digital client and things.
Yeah, I think
So
that, and I think like the biggest picture of that is if you go to one of the challenges, like the one we just had in Dallas, and it's like they can't sell T-shirts,
yes,
but they can give them away as prizes, right? Which
yep,
I think is really interesting, and that's what people, a lot of my friends that were there were kind of mad that they couldn't buy a T-shirt, and you had to have tickets for T-shirts, and I'm like, well, I promise you, if they had the opportunity to sell them, they would be being sold, you know what
yes,
I mean? Because they would, be making all kinds of money off of that. So yeah, no, I think it's a pretty interesting situation. I just thought, for me, I was like, they shut down Pixelborn at like an interesting time, a few months before D23. So the hope's there, but yeah, I'm interested to see what they're going to show off at D23. I think it's like an interesting time for D23 to happen since like the new set comes out, literally this week, and they've already announced all the cards to my knowledge. I mean, unless they're gonna surprise us with anything crazy coming out. But so it's like, are they gonna go ahead and hint at the next set coming out? Like, or so I don't know. They also might announce the like the actual world championships for this year, which I think, or like the regional finals and things like
Continentals,
that, which
yeah.
they haven't announced yet. So, which I think will be cool events
Oh,
as we
very,
go forward
very
towards the end
cool.
of the
And
year.
I missed out on. In hindsight, I really should have went to Atlanta.
Same, yeah.
I was in Atlanta for a wedding the week before,
Mm,
and was like, I don't want to go back to back. But then I failed to think about Memorial Day being that Monday, so
yeah,
you would have had the extra day to travel and stuff. And I really missed the boat on that one. I'm hoping where we're located. I'm in Southern Kentucky. You're in Tennessee. Nashville would be a great spot to eventually get something.
yeah,
Cincinnati is another place. So we do have Indianapolis is not too far from me, a little bit farther for you.
right.
But within driving distance and stuff. So we're within driving distance to several big cities.
Sure.
Maybe not continentals. I don't think New York has anything yet, so I would say that's
That's true.
a
Yeah.
good shot maybe. And then for Worlds, if they don't do Disney World for Worlds, what are
Yeah,
you doing? I mean, like
I
I
would be
think
shocked. Yeah.
everybody will just be so disappointed if you don't do it there. So
Yeah.
it
Like
just
I
makes
think,
the most sense.
they did it like Coronado Springs or something like that at Disney World
Yeah.
would be a big hit. Like I don't know, like I'm seeing them doing like regionals at like Disneyland and then doing like the actual World Championships at Disney World or vice versa. I think would be pretty cool. But yeah, that's probably that's realistically, like I said, it's probably what's going to get announced at D23 is like those two events, because what else would they talk about? But there's still the small hope that they announced. Like they're like, oh, the online client's available now. Go play it when you get home. And I'm like, yes, but that's there's too much hope there.
Yeah, it's. I'd say it's coming. There's so much money on the table
Oh, for
that it
sure.
has to
Yeah.
happen. I mean, they just can't leave that much. So, in due time, though, it's hard to put it in perspective too. This game has literally been out for a year. Like we're
Yeah.
literally coming up on the exact 1 year of Gen Con and stuff when it released. So it's kind of hard to um, as many games as I've already played and stuff like that, to put it in perspective that we're still in the baby phases of this game. I mean, it's still
Yeah.
we just now got our 1,000th card, or
Hmm.
we're about to, so it's
Right.
still a lot to cover.
Yeah. Yeah, that is crazy to think about. Yeah. And there's just like so many deck archetypes that they haven't made cards for yet, like that will come as the just the more dig cards come out and things like that I think will be interesting. So, but no, I think we're at an interesting point going into year two where it's like you had last set, which I think probably had like the first controversy of like Lorcana's life, like with Bucky, right? Like, where it was like people were like, we should ban this week one of this set, then they didn't, and it just kind of stuck around. So yeah, I think it's interesting times going into set 5 here.
And we're going to do we'll get into today. We're just talking about our favorite cards from the set, but we'll get into meta predictions and stuff here shortly as well in another video. But there's finally some archetypes that are have been kind of fun, but they've not really been like hyper competitive. Like they've not
Right.
they're not going to show up to a DLC. But now I think that's about to change. I think that there's some stuff that's getting ready to shake out, and I've got a theory for how the meta is going to work out. I want to see if I'm correct. I think that I've got a pretty good read on it. Um, that's the one good thing about really like immersing yourself into a full month of set champs is you really learn the meta game. And then what was interesting about that and stuff too is I played in 5 over the course of the month and getting to see just the progression of the meta and stuff because I saw a lot of the same players
Yep.
here and all throughout the course of the month and things. So seeing the just the way it shifted and things like that, and everybody was so worried about Emerald Steel coming out of the gate, and I only played 2 the entire month. So
yeah,
it was not the big boogeyman that we thought. Sapphire Steel was much harder for me to deal with. And so I would gladly have. I was undefeated against Emerald Steel, so I would have gladly seen more Bucky, and less Cogsworth if I could have. So
it's fair. No, yeah, I had a similar situation. So I went to Dallas and then played 6 of my 9 rounds against Emerald Steel, which should have been good for my deck, but was not good that day.
Yeah.
So you win some, you lose some, right?
That's true. That is very true. And then it's all about perspective. We'll do a video at some point too about perspective and things too, because it's I've like I said initially, I've been gaming for 22 years, so I've at a high level for 22 years. I mean, I was at one point ranked the number 1 ranked player for Star Wars miniatures. Highly ranked in D&D miniatures or World of Warcraft miniatures and stuff like that, and competed in 8 different world championships. So over the years, I've had to like learn those hard lessons of sometimes, I care as much as I can care about stuff, but at the same point, like you've got to put it in perspective. Like it's easy to at the end of the day, it's still a game.
Right.
And that's the reason I think that now I'm kind of glad that this game came along when it did for me, and I'm able to have that perspective on it and I have a lot of fun with it. It's because it's not that I don't want to be competitive and stuff like that, but end of the day, as long as I just come in and have a good time and play my best, that's kind of where I want to do. So, but
yeah. What you want to jump into some
let's
some
jump
set
into
5
some
cards?
Yeah, let's jump into some cards. We've got. I will kick things off because this one I'm very excited about, and I'm glad you left it for me. You picked your cards first, and I was like, oh, he left it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, I did what I can. I stole one I thought you might have picked, so I felt a little bad about it. But
I have a case coming, and I will opening weekend. I'm getting 4 foils of her. I really wanted her to have an enchanted because I would have tracked down 4 enchanted to have the playset in my deck.
Wow.
But she didn't, so I'm going to settle for some foils in the deck. But we're going to kick things off with Daisy Duck, Donald's Date, 1 cost, uninkable, 1/4, 2 lore, and power is big prize. Whenever this character quests, each opponent reveals the top card of their deck. If it's a character card, they may put it into their hand. Otherwise, they put it on the bottom of their deck, which is hugely, hugely powerful. We've been playtesting a little bit, and on one hand, you're like, oh, you're feeding them cards, you're giving them more characters to play. The old adage holds very true. It doesn't matter how many cards they have in their hand if they're dead. Because, yes, I mean, it does not matter at all. The 1/4 stat line on her, that 4 willpower, 4 health, is so hard to take down. And on a 2-quester and things like that, I mean, before aggro had to rely on Maleficent and Lilo for the 2 lures. Now you have a body that can withstand a few hits. She's getting you 4 or 6 lure every time she hits the board. So I mean, like, you've got to think, what are the good answers for her? Like Gaston. And guess
Not
what?
much.
Gaston's not touching her until turn 3.
Yep.
He's playing on 2, hitting her on 3 and killing her then. But then she's already got your 4 lure. And in these kind of aggro matchups, every single lure that you can cram in early is going to make a huge difference. So she is going to see a lot of play, especially initially. Now, eventually the meta is going to correct and somebody's going to figure out some answers for her quickly. But initially, man, she's going to see some play heavy, and she's probably the one I'm most excited about. And
Yeah.
I cannot wait to see what she actually does once people get her in hand.
Yeah, I think what we saw from last set, and this was just, again, I'm newer to the game than you are, but I think what I saw last set is one of the bigger problems. So obviously you had Bucky, but if you discount Bucky, obviously the other most dominant deck was Ruby Amethyst, right? And obviously Flynn Rider was a key component of that deck, but Flynn Rider was only a key component because of Sisu.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the issue with Sisu, obviously his varying attack is obviously the big part of his card. But the problem with Sisu is it had 4 health. And that basically takes him out of. It was borderline hard. It was impossible to kill him on turn 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless like if I playing blue still, like I had to go with either like the Captain Hook and a Smee, which means you're trading 2 characters for 1. Like and that made me like I had to take like the Argus into the deck, right? Which whenever we played, I think you saw my Argus that was literally in the deck just to do that 4 damage just to the Sisu, right? And yeah, I think that's what's the most interesting thing about Daisy Duck. Like, I think at 1-3, Daisy Duck, like if the rest of the card stays exactly the same at 1-3, the card's still pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it would still get played. At 1-4, it's like, it's really, really good. And I think that one's going to be a big issue because, and just like you said earlier, like, it was funny watching set championships where, like, in our area, there wasn't much Bucky. Like, there wasn't much Bucky being brought. So, like, the last weekend of set championships, people started bringing more aggro decks because there wasn't the Bucky to kind of counteract those aggro decks. And I literally got beat, and same thing in Dallas. Like, I literally got beat like on turn 4 in a game from this aggro deck just because like couldn't answer the characters. It was over. They hit 20 at 4. And yeah, so that the Daisy Duck is, for someone that plays a control deck like me, is a very, very scary, a very, very scary card, and it's making me think maybe I don't get to play the deck that I want to play at the start of set 5 at least, until we start figuring out some pieces to take that card out.
Yeah. So why don't you? So now go to your first card here. Let's see.
Yeah. So with that in mind, I've been thinking. I was a blue steel player last set, just basically to count. I like the ramp with blue. Like the control. I've always liked control decks in card games when I used to play Hearthstone. So, but I've been thinking I might have to switch decks, and the deck that kind of has been calling me or maybe singing to me if I want to stay on theme, is Still Song. And so the card that I'm most excited about is Prince Naveen, the ukulele player. So 3/3 stat line. Can sing for 6, but then whenever you play this character, you may play a song with cost 6 or less for free. And that is such a good ability, because there are just so many great songs that cost 5 or less. I mean, the card is 6 or less, but 5 or less, like you got A Whole New World, you got Grab Your Swords. You got Zeus, there are just a countless amount of still songs that you can sing that are 5, that are 6 or less, that you'll get to play for free. And then of course he gets to sing, and he quests for 2. So I think he's a really, really good character. I don't think he's like as good as Daisy. But I do think in Still Song, I think he's going to be slotted in that deck. The only thing that's a problem with him is that he costs 4 and he's not inkable.
Yeah, and Still Song
Which
usually runs a lot of uninkables. So
Yeah.
that's the thing is you have to look at. Now it's going to be a lot different than the Still Song that we saw, in set 4.
Yeah.
Where it was more of an aggro version. Pride Lands is probably getting dropped. Flutes can probably stay.
Yeah.
But you're definitely going to have retool things. But you got to think the curve now that you got. You could have Cinderella on 1. Awesome. You can have Smee on 2. That's great. 3, drop an Ariel. 4, drop a Naveen. I mean, you know, yeah, on
Then you
3,
see
3 Ariel finds you, grab your sword. She finds you Zeus. She
Whole
finds
New
you
World
whole
and
new world,
Zeus.
whatever
Yeah,
you need.
yeah,
Naveen comes in. You have a 3/3 body that quests for 2 and plays that song then for free. If it's a whole new world, he just refills your hand, and then Ariel can sing something on top. I mean, this is really, I think, where Still Song needs to be. It's why, as excited as I am for Daisy, I'm worried about Still Song
yeah,
because I think Still Song is going to have all the answers. As an old Still Song player, I won a Stitch with Still Song, so I realized that it could beat. I beat some aggro that day and stuff. So I know that Still Song is the bane of Still in general is the bane of its
yeah.
existence, but Still Song is definitely poised to be right up there at the top of the initial meta. So
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, I think just seeing from everyone in the community, like everyone's pretty much predicting like a pretty hard aggro push at the beginning of this set. Which, why would you not? Like, if I pull 4 daisies, like I'm probably gonna play a yellow aggro deck, right? Like, it's probably gonna come. So it's like, I think if you can find a pretty, like, I think that the easiest counter to point at the aggro kind of push that's gonna come is Still Song. And if you hit that 1, 2, 3, 4 curve that you mentioned, like it's it's pretty good. It's probably
yeah,
the best 1, 2, 3, 4 you can probably play in Lorcana. And then of course if you have the songs in your hands to sing them, like at that point, like you can clear their board pretty easily and then move on. So, but yeah, I think it's a less exciting pick than your pick for the first card, but I think
no,
it's going to be a really good card. Yeah,
I'm very excited for Naveen. He's definitely one that we've got to get 4 of. So my son that's his deck that he's wanting to focus on is Still Song. So which means I can't focus on it because where I have to get
I hear you.
8 Naveens, I need to get another 4 Rapunzels. Like there's a whole lot of stuff that I would need to get extras of. So I think I'm just going to run aggro for the first part, and
Yeah, which I
whenever I
mean,
have
the
the other
cool
stuff.
thing
But
about I mean, we'll obviously go through all 6 cards that we've picked, but that's the only legendary card that we picked out of the 6.
yeah,
Um, and I think that's what's cool about Lorcana is that, like, obviously, like there are great legendary cards in Lorcana, but like a lot of the decks you play aren't just filled to the brim with legendary cards. Like I go back and think about like playing Hearthstone and like some of the control decks in Hearthstone. Like it was just like every card in the deck were legendaries, and it was like you're spending a lot of money to get those cards. I mean, not to say the Lorcana is cheap, but it is great that there are a lot of these great cards that we're going to talk about today that aren't legendaries, which is pretty exciting because it gives you a chance to pull 4 of them and not have to go out and try to buy them from TCG or from your local game shop.
speaking of not a legendary, here's my second one. It is Amethyst Chromacon. So we saw a Chromacon for every color. Amethyst, though, I think might be the best one. It is 2 cost item. Amethyst Light is the ability exert it, and each player may draw a card. Now, on one hand, yes, you're giving resources and cards to your opponent, but again, it doesn't matter how many cards they have in their hand if they're dead. So you are adding, every turn, especially as the aggro deck. We've been playtesting a little bit. I kind of use proxies for Daisy and for Chromacon just to kind of see. I was like, how good is this stuff going to be? Oh,
Yep.
it's good because the aggro stuff that you're playing, you've got to think you're running out of. Generally, the drawback to the aggro stuff has been you run out of cards,
Yep.
and then when you run out of cards, you're just top decking, and especially against like a Still Song or a Sapphire Still or something like that can kind of deal with your threats one at a time. You're just dead in the water. Well, now though, you're not dropping one at a time. You're dropping 2 or 3 cards at a time. And that's a lot harder to deal with, especially at that point in the game whenever, as an aggro player, you should be looking at 14 plus lore. Then every single time that you drop 2 or 3 characters on the board, um, that's threatening, getting you closer and closer to that end game. And so that's the reason I think this card, at first I was like, I hate giving my opponent a card. It doesn't matter though when you're just able to just fuel that so
Yep.
fast and get right there. So that's the reason I picked this card. It's one that we've been playing with a little bit, and it's one I'm excited to actually get it in hand and see what it does. But it maybe it doesn't make the final cut for the Amethyst Amber aggro deck, but it feels good though.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that this set is kind of opening the door to like have playable, like I'm gonna say playable. I wouldn't say like they're gonna be included in decks, but like there are like a playable item for each ink color in Lorcana right now, right? Like, back, last set, like what was cool about the meta is that, if I saw that I was playing Ruby Ruby Amethyst, wasn't worried about items at all. Like I knew there wasn't any coming, so like if there's any cards in your deck that were, like item removal, you could just ink them, get rid of them because like ultimately you weren't going to need them. I think a card like that pops up and it's like, well, okay, that you have to reset your thinking on the matchup now, which I think is going to be really cool. Which I don't know if that card, just like you mentioned, I don't know if that card is going to be like a meta card, but I do think it's like if you put it in your deck for like a set championships down the road and like you pull it out and your opponent's not expecting it, I think they're going to be in a lot of trouble, right? Especially if you're playing the aggro deck, because like you mentioned, like as a control player, if you're playing against the aggro deck, you're just waiting for them to run out of cards so you can kind of take control of the board and just basically just close them out at the end of the game. And that makes it so you can't do that as easily, right? Especially because there aren't that many great remove item cards in Lorcana at this point, which I think is going to become a bigger issue as the set goes on. I think it already was kind of an issue, like depending on what deck, like against my blue steel, like if I put out a Lucky Dime, most decks don't have anything to deal with that. And so I think those cards, I think set 6 will probably introduce a lot of like item removal cards, going in like the next set. There are a few extra now, but no, I think that's an interesting pick. It definitely is the best Chromacon, I think. But it's not the one that's trading for the most money right now, though, which is interesting. Looking at the TCG price, it's actually the least valuable one. Which of course, the cards aren't actually out yet. Really, I mean, I'm sure some people have gotten them somehow, but. So yeah, on to my second pick, I stole one that I thought that you might be interested in.
This was one of them.
Yeah, I figured this might be on your list, so that's why I went first, so I could steal this one from you. But the next one is the Library, which is Amethyst card. It's a 3-cost location. You pay 1 to move a character into the library, and then it has 8 life. And then you get 1 lore per turn. Every turn it goes by. Which I think this card is good even without the lore gain. I think with the 1 lore gain, I think it makes this card pretty playable. I'll be interested to see. Like, let me read the subtext first. So, whenever a character is banished while here, you may draw a card. And that's just so good for Ruby Amethyst. Like, it, I was kind of, because I loved playing Ruby Amethyst last set, but then like moved into Blue Steel just because I thought it was gonna be safer against Bucky. But Ruby Amethyst is a deck that can draw cards. I mean, it has card draw everywhere, right? It's got it's got Chernobogs, it's got the Magic Brooms, it's got Maleficence, it's got the Rabbit, it's got Friends on the Other Side, right? Like there's just card draw everywhere. And like first off, like locations are already tough to deal with in Lorcana, right? Like it's no one's happy when a location gets played because you're gonna have to like use some resources to get rid of that location. But then a location like this, like if you put a Chernobogs there and you put a Magic Broom there, like you're drawing 2 cards for those that you were already going to banish those cards anyway, so it's not like you're losing anything for it. So yeah, I think the library is a pretty interesting location. It's almost like a Queen's Castle Junior, right? Where it's like you don't get the card draw just for them being there, but if they get banished, you do get the card draw. So it's like a Queen's Castle Junior. So what I'm really interested to see this set is, are people going to end up going for the library over Queen's Castle? Like, is that swap going to happen? I've seen a few like preliminary lists kind of come out that people are running both. I don't know that that's great. Like, I don't know that you want 8 of your 60 cards to be locations. I might be wrong there. But what do you like, since you're the expert Ruby Amethyst player in the chat? What do you think about that? Do you think the library is going to take Queen's Castle's place? Do you think do you think there's a spot for both of them in the deck? Like, what do you see the
I could
future
see
of
a
that?
split between both of them.
Yeah.
The one thing I worry about with locations is specifically for Ruby Amethyst going into the initial is that they're going to be too slow. So Ruby Amethyst, and we'll get into this in our next video more, but it's got the power of Ruby Amethyst is that it has just a toolbox for everything. It has answers for everything. We need to find out the questions that we need to answer, though. So
Yep.
initially, Ruby Amethyst is probably going to struggle a little bit out of the gate, and people will be like, "Oh, it's not the big bad guy." You just wait. Once we figure out what we got to answer, Ruby Amethyst will get tech for it. It will adapt, and it will come back, and it'll be force at the end, just like it has been. Well, since the beginning of time, basically. So it was the big bad set, the big bad deck from set 1. It was the dominating set in deck in set 2. And then set 3, the same kind of thing happened where it started off slow. Everybody's like, "Oh, it's gone." Then it just had to find the right combination of cards to use. And then it was by the set 3. I mean, it was topped Atlanta. It didn't win it, but it was right there in the finals. And then we've seen it here in set 4. We've seen the same thing where early on everybody's like, "Oh, it's not that bad." No, it's a force now. Again here at the end. So that's my prediction for what will happen with it. The library is a great card. I think the meta needs to slow down from what it would initially be in order to see it. But I think it's going to be. It reminds me kind of like Lady Tremaine and Madame Medusa. Like what's the right split for that? What's the right split for library and castle? Kind of be another.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Question that we have to look at for that. So, but speaking of Ruby Amethyst, let me go into my last card because it is another Amethyst card. And it's one that I really think she's got a lot of potential. It's one that we saw her revealed in the initial, things, I think. So everybody, you forget because then we get so many other toys to look at. We forget about this one that we opened first on Christmas. So it is Elsa, the 5th Spirit. She's a 5-cost inkable Amethyst card. 2 power, 5 willpower, 5 health. 1 lore. Rush, evasive, and has the ability crystallize. When you play this character, exert chosen opposing character. So she is, I really like her right now for, because we're going to be looking at some aggro stuff that you've got to be able to deal with on board pretty good. So her to be able to say, at that point you hopefully have kind of locked down and you're starting now. You just need to answer their threats as they're putting them out. So they drop down a Lilo or something like that, and you're like, "Crap, how am I going to deal with that?" Boom. Elsa comes out, she exerts it, and then she punches that little girl in the face. So it's I think she's going to be a good tool. Maybe she doesn't end up making the cut, but I think there's a lot of potential there, especially like say that we have a meta where Bucky comes back into play. Now granted she's 5 instead of 3, as opposed to that and things, but she is an answer that you could have in your toolbox to use and things, and especially being able to exert something that is they're just sitting back and trying not to exert, so you do have that kind of ability too. So I think she's a very, very versatile card, and one that I'm excited to see, and maybe it could be one of those things too where this is not her time just yet. But again, Ruby Amethyst, like I said, they have all the tools. We just need to, plug in the right ones in the right spots, and then we'll be good to go. So she's another one. Think about like, she does compete in the 5 slot with Maui. So
it's true. Yeah,
and
it's true.
Maui's just one of the. I did finally pull the trigger this set, and I have 4 enchanted Mauis to play set. So because I love that card so much, it's for the rock. That's who we did it for. So, so but she's a card that I was very excited for. Like I said, she's got potential. She's playable, and what rarity is she? She is a super rare at least. So
yeah, it's a pretty interesting because there's also the 8-cost Elsa.
Yes,
that you could shift for 6. And that would be a pretty gross turn 5, turn 6 play to go from this Elsa into the 8-cost Elsa with a shift, because then you could exert 2 characters and you could clear the board. Yeah, and they don't ready. Yeah, exactly. Like, because the very first set 3 during the set championships didn't have that many cards, but had enough to make like a off meta blurple deck, and came in 12th, so just missed the top cut. But the Elsa just caught people off guard because you do your math on trying to finish the game, and you expect to have characters to do things, and you're like, well, guess what? They're not anymore. I hate to tell you. So I think that's an interesting mechanic. Like, I wish there was which, there's also like the 2-cost Pinocchio that can exert a chosen character. So it's like, I think we're kind of like if we could find like a 3 or 4 cost one that had a little bit better stat line, that exerted one that had a rush, I think would be like a really nice spot. But I think that one's really interesting. I just want someone to do the 5 cost into the 8 cost shift. That's the dream for me. I don't know. The shift cards always make me happy. So
Yeah, I think there we might be a while away from it just because we may not have all the pieces to the puzzle just yet. But you do have the Elsa, like you said, um, the legendary from set one from the first chapter, and then you've also got that new genie that comes out this set that characters that are exerted cannot ready. So there is a lockdown potential out there for
mm,
this kind of stuff. Now, I don't think we have all the tools for it just yet, but there's some stuff there. It's like, you know what? Maybe Elsa Genie Lockdown is something that we're, set 6 or 6, 7.
yeah,
We're kind of looking at it then, and we're like, oh man, and then you think we're complaining about Bucky? Imagine never being able to ready your characters and how frustrating
yeah,
that'll be at some point. So,
yeah.
that's
Jeez.
it'll
Yeah,
be.
you're right about that. The community would be upset.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll be like, oh, we missed that squirrel now. Come on.
Yep. No kidding. All right, then rolling into my last one. So I wanted to make sure I pick a sapphire card here, just to make my sapphire still heart happy. So is it Tipo? I hope I pronounced that correctly. Yeah, Tipo. So growing sun.
Yeah.
So 2 cost inkable card. It's got a 1/2 stat line, so nothing too exciting there, but has an ability, Measure Me Again. So when you play this character, you may put a card from your hand into your inkwell face down and exerted. So essentially, it's a 1 jump ahead, except you get a character, and you're pulling the card from your hand versus it going from the top of your deck. So, if- you know, same cost as 1 jump ahead, but you do play it from your hand versus the top of your deck. And I picked this card just because I know I know the aggro decks are coming, right? Like, I know at the start of set 5, the aggro decks are coming. And for the blue steel, or even for ruby sapphire, like, if you can get ramped up to 5 or 6, like, you have a good chance of winning that game, right? Like, if they can't get to like 10 or 12 before you get to turn 5, you probably win that game.
Hmm.
And so finding the right ramp is obviously what's going to win you the game. And I think this is because I played 3 cost Mickey Mouse, Detective Mickey Mouse, this last set, just so I could have that 1/3 body down, to make sure that I, could do something. It was helpful, like, against Be King Undisputed with Ruby Amethyst, right? It was a target that they played Be King Undisputed for 4. Like, I was like, well, you can have my 1/3 Mickey, which never made anyone happy, but that's what he was there for, right? And I think if you have Tipo here, you could go Tipo and keep the Mickey Mouse in your deck. And at that point, that's maybe you get rid of Fishbone Quill. Probably not, because that's the over ramp. But if the meta is like really really aggro, like, which I think it might be, you don't want to play Fishbone Quill anyway, because
Hmm.
that's a dead turn. And so if you had Tipo into Mickey Mouse Detective, you have 2 characters that are going to kill most of the aggro characters in Lorcana have pretty low health. So you're gonna have a good chance of banishing those characters, but you're also gonna keep ramping. So if you have Tipo into Mickey Mouse, then you grab your sword the next turn, and the board's probably cleared at that point.
Hmm.
Into a Tinkerbell after that, right? And so that gives you a nice curve. So that card. I don't think it's like super great. Like, I don't know that I don't even know if it's gonna be like, I don't even know if it's gonna see play. But I do, like, again, I think if the meta is like super super aggro, if you play Fishbone Quill, you're falling behind. Like, you're almost conceding the game if you're playing Fishbone Quill, because you're giving them another 2, 4, 6 lore, on turn 3 that you just can't afford to give them, versus like actually putting a body out there and actually ramping up. Because in those aggro games, like, you're not trying to get to 12 ink, right? Like, you're just trying to get to like 7, really just 5 to get to grab your swords, and at that point you can settle the game down. So that card did, like, I don't see that many people that are that excited about Tipo, but like, I think Tipo is going to be pretty good. I think he's going to find a place.
Yeah, and you've also got to think you played Tipo on 2 on turn 3. He could theoretically sing 1 jump ahead.
That's true.
Because it is a song, so that's another option. To where, and then you got to think. So okay, you're 1 ink, 2 ink. You play Tipo. He gives you 3 ink. Next turn you play Mickey, that's 4 ink. He sings one jump ahead, that's 5 ink right there on turn 3. Pretty
Yeah.
powerful stuff, and then you can find your answers, and turn 3, aggro decks love to have you killed by turn 4 or 5. So if you're
Yeah.
turn 3 and you've got all your ink right there ready to go, like you said, you got your Tinkerbells and stuff like that you can get online at that point. So yeah, it's Sapphire is going to have to find the early game,
Yeah.
which has been the glaring weakness for Sapphire. So if it can find the early game, and Tipo, like Detective Mickey, could be the right answers and stuff like that, to where you're, you are coming up and you're able to fight for the board a little bit more early on and stuff, and the aggro doesn't run over you. So
Yeah, and not just that, but like also, which we haven't talked too much about. Of course, we're gonna get into more like what we think about the meta in the next episode, but there's still a discard deck out there that's going to come in, right? Like this discard's not going away. And you know what? I think what was most frustrating for me last set is, that Ursula getting played and one of your songs getting taken. Like, I could deal with Bucky. Like the Bucky didn't really bother me that much, but like the Ursula was what really hurt me in that matchup. And, with a card like Tipo and then even like into the Mickey Mouse, at that point, you don't even need to really play a song. Like you could technically tech out one jump ahead if you wanted to, keep Fishbone cool if you wanted the extra ramp up. But at that point, like they can't get rid of your ramp with an Ursula, which allows you to get up. But you could still play one jump ahead and sing it like you said too, which is really good. So I think the Sapphire Steel players are going to have a lot of things to think about. Like there's a lot of tools in the tool chest, which I think there were last set that. You had the people that were playing, the Mickey Mouse Detective like me, the one jump aheads, so there was already some disagreement on what the right ramp targets were. But now if you do because also like Tipo with Mickey Mouse, like you're not losing as many cards like you do with Fishbone Quill. So like there was the variant of Sapphire Steel that didn't have the wheel in it.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, if you're not discarding your cards with Fishbone Quill, like maybe you don't need the ramp, or maybe you don't need the wheel, which could be interesting. So I don't know. I don't want to give up on Sapphire Steel. I think it's gonna have a hard life at the beginning of set 5. But I think just like Ruby Ann, I think it'll find its place later on in the set once you figure out what the right answers are for what's there.
Yeah, that's all about finding that early curve and stuff like that. And like you said, it's going to be very thanks to Daisy, I think, in large part, it's going to be very aggressive early on. And that's going to be the first thing is all the aggro and stuff, which I'm particularly looking forward to seeing high level aggro play.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll be able to cram in 4 games per round at some of these DLCs if it's aggro matchups, because they'll be like, well, that took 10 minutes and we're done. Like especially in a 2-game
especially in the best of the 2. Yeah.
So yeah, it's we did have a week between for set champs. We had 1 week where we didn't go to any, and everybody went to locals, which was the 1 weekend of the month that everybody went to locals was this one where everybody was off. And we just wanted to have fun. We were tired of the meta, so everybody just brought off meta stuff. And I played 3 aggro decks in a row, and I brought aggro myself. And my entire tournament run took less than 30 minutes. All 3 rounds that we played took less than 30 minutes. So, it's just so that's what we're in for, is that. So, but yeah, these are some cards that we are definitely excited for. We're hoping to pull quite a few of these coming up, and have some fun testing them out and trying to see what can combat Daisy and the aggressive meta that we're looking on initially. And then also once that's kind of starts to settle down a little bit, and once aggro gets figured out and the answers to that can happen, then we can really start cooking with like Ruby Amethyst and Sapphire, and trying to see what then they can really do, because then the meta will slow down just a little bit, just enough for them to find their footing, kind of figure out what they need to do. So that's what I'm excited for.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think the first local that we pull up to in set 5 is going to be it's going to finish pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's going to be a pretty quick night.
Be a quick night. So for him, he is Hybrid Theory. I'm JerryDamage. hope you guys enjoy the first episode of Be Prepared. And I wish that I was like Baker, like Lorcana Villain, and I could just sing it, and just belt it out, because that'd be a great way to end every episode.
Same.
But
Same. No, but yeah, thank y'all for tuning in. And if you have a card that you're excited for in set 5 that we didn't mention, like, feel free to leave it in the comments below. Hopefully we'll all be opening our cards here in 5 or 6 days. So
yeah.
So good luck on everyone opening their packs.